So, boys, I want to talk about triceps training and specifically the best exercises for building bigger and stronger triceps. Triceps is not a super complicated, it's not a super complicated muscle group, right? But I think it's misunderstood.
Sure.
And so I want to talk a little bit about the best exercises for training triceps to both increase size or mass and strength all in. So I'm going to turn this one over to you, Caleb. What are your favorite or best tricep exercises for mass and strength?
Well, I'm probably going to let Jeff talk about the strength part a little bit more, because the way I see it, if you build muscle, you build contractile tissue that is now a stronger muscle. And so as a competitive bodybuilder, my goal is always to build bigger triceps anyway. And then the side effect of that is they are stronger. So with like the powerlifters I train, I do have them do these kind of movements anyway. Always with cables. First of all, there are definitely people who are built in a way where their bodies fit the force curves of like doing certain exercises with free weights. For myself, I'm not one of them. I have really long forearms relative to my humerus. And so the mechanics just don't really line up very well when I try to do like a dumbbell skull crusher or a barbell skull crusher, overhead extensions, things like that. So
we're talking the difficulty for you to use gravity and free weight in order to target the triceps you want to target the triceps in the way you want to target them, because there's these lever arms that are forcing other areas of your body that are effectively, you might feel like they're working harder than your triceps are.
Exactly. Yeah. Those areas, namely being like joints and connective tissues, where there's just more torque going through them than I would like. So I like to use cables, and there are 3 movements that I've kind of been oscillating between right now over the past few months. And they've been working really well for me. And that's, 2 of them they're all just single arm cable extensions, just all with my arm and the cable attachment, the cable outlet in different positions. Okay. For one of those, I'm keeping my upper arm basically in line with my torso, maybe slightly behind it.
So you're standing?
I'm standing in all of these, yeah. And so I grab the cable with, the working arm, always brace with my free arm against the cable stack. And I'm just basically pressing straight down. So the cable itself is moving diagonally backwards towards my hip. It obviously doesn't reach my hip, but I'm trying to extend backwards so that the line of force is oriented kind of not just straight up and down and not totally horizontally, but, diagonally. Doing it in that way, the long head of the tricep, which, crosses 2 joints, it crosses the elbow, but also the shoulder and inserts in the scapula, originates in the scapula, sorry. That way it's being worked through its fully, most shortened position.
Versus being, say, in a skull crusher position,
where it's a bit more neutral.
Exactly.
And
so think about that. So for the people listening, think about that as I bring that shoulder into flexion, and that would be, it's the weird part about shoulder flexion extension is this. So imagine I'm coming up with the elbow is going to be in front of my shoulder now. So I'm up. What's happening there is I'm kind of in a neutral position for the triceps, all of the triceps, but specifically for that long head, right? And if you really want to build mass, you want to get as much of a contraction through there in its fully lengthened position. Not that a skull crusher is a bad exercise.
Not at all.
There is no bad exercise. There's only bad application, right? But the point of that is it's just for people listening. Hey, so you're telling me I should never be training my triceps at different shoulder positions or humeral positions at the shoulder. I don't hear you saying that, but maybe you could elaborate on that in a minute.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's go back. Sorry. So you're standing there, you're holding on, you're bracing, and you're extending all the way back, getting that hand back behind your hip, essentially. So it's back behind your torso at full extension.
My hand is actually probably more in line with my hip.
Got it.
But the direction my elbow is pointing is a little bit more diagonally
backwards.
Got it. And so I'll use this exercise, and then I'll use an overhead extension where I'm now taking that long head of the tricep through its fully lengthened position. So my arm is overhead, my hand is back so that my elbow is, my elbow's flexed and the tricep is stretched. The long head is now being taken through its fully lengthened position. And so, like we talked about earlier, I think in the bicep video, like a muscle that's trained when it's fully lengthened against load is going to have some better hypertrophy outcomes than just only training it through like a neutral position. So Obviously, you could do a skull crusher as well. That'd be kind of like a mid-length, but I feel like you cover kind of the whole end of the spectrum by doing something where that long head is in the shortest position and something where it's in the most lengthened position. And the reason I referenced the long head is because the lateral and medial heads tend to do a pretty decent amount of work in traditional pressing movements. If you need extra work for those areas, fine, do some extra work with some accessories. But most people are not building very big long heads of their tricep. And so it makes sense if we're going to isolate anything, start with that.
Yeah, I love that answer. So going back to that overhead position with that elbow pointed towards the ceiling, that's the position we're talking about for those people that are listening. So that would be, in a sense, it would look like an old school French curl if you took that dumbbell behind your head and you had both hands on the dumbbell. Yeah. So I want to talk about that.
Sure.
And that what you just described is isolating individual arms.
Yes.
You are not doing this 2 arms at a time. You want to talk about that?
Yeah. And you brought up a point I want to touch on also. One issue that I have with doing the French press overhead with with a dumbbell is that you are basically forced to put your upper arm fully, pointing the ceiling, like you said, elbow pointing the ceiling. When in reality, for most people, that's not going to be the most ideal position for the tricep. When I do this, I'm probably pointing like diagonally.
Yeah. So your elbow actually hasn't gotten past your ear.
Exactly. Right. Now, part of that could be because my lats are very tight. And so, getting full shoulder flexion like that is a little bit uncomfortable. But I mean, in general, I think moving the elbow to the scapular plane, this is about as high as it's going to go. In a most comfortable kind of safe position, the tricep is being fully lengthened there. And so when I do these, I have my elbow kind of pointing 45 degrees away from my body, not straight towards the midline, definitely not flared out all the way as well. And it's kind of diagonally upward. If you're watching the camera, you can see what I'm doing, but I can't really describe it better than that. The reason I'll do a single arm at a time is because let's look at that position now, but with 2 arms. Well, force is being applied in opposite directions almost because my arms extend out in different directions,
pulling it apart.
So you could use like a rope attachment, and that works. We can talk about that too. Personally, I just prefer being able to feel each side individually, so I can really focus on making sure my shoulder's in a comfortable position, and that I'm really, really, one side's not working hard on the other or anything like that.
Yeah, so these are, again, specific to your goals and with a lot of the people that you work with, specific to building mass, right? And we're trying to find and work angles, right, that make the most sense. That might not be super applicable to everybody. I mean, again, who doesn't want a nice looking set of arms, underneath the t-shirt or in your tank top or in your in your dress, sundress, whatever else that you're wearing. I don't wear sundresses, but maybe you guys do. I'm not really sure. Friday night. Yeah. But let's talk about the importance of like actually building strength through the tricep, Jeff, and like why is it important? So for anybody listening or watching, they're going, dude, I don't want bigger triceps, so I'm not going to do any.
No one's ever said that.
I can't relate.
Yeah, I'm not going to do any of those things. This makes no sense to me. Jeff, what can you bring to the table with regard to the importance of tricep strength?
Well, when we're looking at, you can look at it from multiple different directions. Joint health, one being one. Biceps and triceps come into the labrum and attach, right? If we have a imbalance in between both of the front and side of the joint, right, we can tear our labrum, shoulder health. With that being said, in regards, like he's saying, tricep crosses into the scapula. It also goes up into, like I said, the labrum, right? So building strength through the shoulder and the functionality with the tricep is extremely important. Now, when we're looking at strength, it's going to be completely different than a bodybuilding idea, right? And this is where it gets kind of tricky to teach people difference between, okay, I'm going to go through an isolation movement and I'm really going to try to feel my triceps, or I'm going to push this fucking weight off of me. Right.
Yep.
Completely different. Now for me in tricep training, I love weighted dips. Now for a lot of people, this is not going to be a good exercise.
Right. The shoulders can't handle it. They don't have the strength to.
They just don't have the retraction. They can't depress their shoulders. The upper thoracic area is cleaved. Right. When we think about, and cleaving meaning the brain is just not as aware of that area.
Connection.
Right. We don't have the best proprioception in that area.
Well, because we're not sending the right signals.
Yeah, exactly. And so if we look at, tricep strength, the importance of it, one, for bench pressing, any kind of press, right? My lockout, and just being strong in these positions is important.
Right.
And when we think about strength and we're talking about bodybuilding and we're talking about power, all these different things, I just want everyone to know, if you want to have the biggest muscle, you need to train every characteristic of that muscle because it has multiple different fibers. Each fiber has a different characteristic, and that characteristic is trained through a different modality. You got 1 to 5, 8 to 12, 15, pump work, mech, all these different things that are going to bring about the most expression of aesthetics, right? So we need to be focusing on all these different goals. Doesn't mean you need to live in powerlifting, right? You're not a powerlifter like, oh, you need to do 5 reps for 2 years. But you do need to go through and build these different characteristics so you can have this expression of a dense looking muscle that does have hypertrophy and does look like it's popping, right? Because if you live in one of these modalities, you're not going to have that biggest expression, right? And I think Caleb can talk about that a lot, like just staying in the pump work and being like, I need the pump, I need the pump. No, you need to actually build some dense fucking muscle because you don't have any muscle to pump. Like you're like, where's the glycogen storing? It's not,
Right. Yeah, I think it's interesting with the exercise selections I see people making, particularly ladies, for their triceps. I see them doing one or two things very, very often, and neither of them are the two exercises that you described.
It's a dumbbell kickback.
It's always the dumbbell kickback that's in the top 2, always. And going back to your lesson there in terms of joint angles and what's going on in terms of how we're applying force and time under tension, not a good choice. And we don't have to go into all those details today, but you're going to get way more shoulder training than you're going to get tricep training in that. And if you don't have strong shoulders, to Jeff's point, you don't have scapular control, then you could just be jumping from the frying pan into the fire with your shoulder health or lack thereof. So the other one is the old tried and true. It's just basically a bar on a cable tricep press down. Right? And that's very popular. And why are they? One, because you can feel your triceps probably right away, so they can feel them. The other reason is you can set those exercises up really well to see yourself in the mirror. And if you have even just a little bit of a baby tricep sticking out, right, you get a lot of emotional.
It's working.
You get emotional and a visual validation that what you're doing is working things properly. So. And to that point, on the other end of that spectrum, but kind of the same, that's kind of like ego lifting, right? Like if you're throwing heavy weight around because you can see your body moving it, or go back. We were talking about biceps a little while ago with the swinging of the weight. Like they're really. What are you really getting out of that? Except that you may think that you look good in the mirror doing it, and you can see your muscles doing work.
It's a type of emotional validation.
Exactly.
The outcome they're getting at, or going for there.
I could play devil's advocate, like with the cheat girls, right? If you're someone that really knows what the fuck they're doing and you're not throwing weight around, you get a little
100%.
And you just essentially control, you let it go.
I would much rather have you do that rep than just put it down if you're capable.
Exactly.
Right?
Into failure. Like it doesn't
every
matter.
time.
Like
I'm going to do it. You're going to see me doing that on my last couple of reps, couple of sets. If I'm doing arm training, if I'm doing any specific arm.
And also,
training.
I'm not saying going to failure every time. Make sure you guys program that. Just want to throw that out there.
Have someone who knows what they're doing, program it for you, because fatigue management is really important.
Yes.